Hello, all. How are you doing today? I have just watched the first episode of the Netflix live action Avatar The Last Airbender, and I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on it here. Before I get into this, full spoilers, of course, for this and for the 2010 movie, actually, and for Legend of Korra, because I'm talking about the Avatar world, so I just kind of want to be able to talk freely about all the parts of that world, entertainment-wise. So, okay, before I get into this, I want to say, yesterday I recorded my thoughts on what I was anticipating, what I was afraid of, what I hoped for the series before I watched the first episode. So that provides a lot of context. So if you haven't watched that, you don't have to, certainly, but it does provide some context for my review for this episode. So having said that, I need to say also that, and this is going to be kind of setting the tone for the review. You're going to know what I'm going to say, but I do not blame the child actors for the things I'm going to point out in this review, and I certainly don't want to characterize this. I certainly don't want to come off as being rude or dismissive to anyone. I realize the work it takes to put a series together. I really do hope to offer this review in good faith, but having said all that, I have to say I'm having flashbacks, unfortunately, to 2010 with this series. I really didn't like this. I didn't like pretty much the whole episode, and then it redeemed itself a little bit at the end, but probably not enough for me to finish the series, honestly. There were about 3 times during this episode where I almost just turned it off. And I'm going to get into why. So, basically, this first episode, I should say, the problem I'm having with it is mainly down to acting and exposition. I was watching this, and honestly, there were a few times where I was just kind of sitting in disbelief at what I was seeing. That we've now had 14 years since the original movie adaptation came out, and I really don't think we've improved on the remake thing since then. In fact, this has kind of convinced me, this series was kind of a make or break for me with remakes, honestly. And I know that's not fair. It's kind of a lot of weight to put on a series. It's not claiming to be some sort of milestone in remakes. It's just another remake. But after watching this, I'm just thinking, is there really a reason to do remakes like this? Is there really a reason to do it? Because throughout this episode, I was thinking the same thing I've thought during a lot of other remakes that I've watched, which is, I just wish I was watching the original. This episode, from the beginning, seemed to make one of the mistakes I talked about in my pre-season thoughts. And that is, the showrunners have in their mind the original lore, the original show, all of those things we know about the original characters. And because of that, I believe that it's easy to make the mistake of not putting in the work to make sure that the property can stand on its own. This episode was full of exposition, the acting, a lot of the time, again, not blaming the child actors, and a lot of it's down to direction. But unfortunately, I have to be honest with you guys, a lot of the acting in this it felt very flat. It felt like there wasn't a lot of feeling being put into it. It felt like people were just sort of reading off of a page and not really emoting much, because, again, I believe that the reason why that sort of acting was allowed to continue through into the finished product was because everyone knows the story of Avatar and the emotional beats are there. There was a moment in this episode where Aang is shown to be the Avatar and he starts doing his bending and stuff, and the Avatar music cuts in. The bum 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 bum. That music cuts in, And I feel a little bit of an emotional swell from that, but I'm thinking, okay, it's not because this show did the work. It's because the original show did the work, right? And the... Weirdly, this is kind of another negative thing. It's a weird thing to throw in here, but I just thought of it. The fighting looked very choppy for a lot of it. It's like they were cutting out frames when they were animating the bending. That was kind of weird, but that's just a side thing. Anyway, back to the acting. That was not improved. The acting was not improved by the fact that this episode was rushing to get through things. You know, I don't have an exact map laid out here because I didn't take any notes while watching this, but a lot of the reveals that were sprinkled throughout the show, you've got characters just saying them. They've just, you've got characters saying the lines. I think the worst example of this was Gran just reciting the opening speech from the animated series, Water, Earth, Fire, Air, long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. And it's like, I know that's there as a fan thing, and the fan service is a different issue. I'm not really talking about that here, but it felt so exposition-y. It felt so, I'm dumping this knowledge on you. And it also, often in the episode, felt like characters were saying things to each other that they wouldn't normally say, purely for the benefit of the audience. Typically when this is done in scripts, they use the words, as you know. They say, well, as you know, and they say it so that we know it. They didn't do that. It wasn't that explicit, but most of the time, in every scene, I felt like there was a line like that, where instead of showing, I'm going through this character thing, this tribe has this history, this nation went through this. Instead of showing it, they just said it. They just said those lines. I'm scared. I feel this. I feel that. And I don't connect with that because you really should be showing these things. And I'm really starting to feel the fact that they've cut down the length. It really feels like they're rushing. And I hate to say this, but it honestly feels like they're rushing even more than the 2010 movie was. Because while this show certainly has a longer runtime, because the 2010 movie I think was around 90 minutes, and this is much longer than that, they're also trying to fit more stuff in there. So when you add the fact that I think they're trying to fit more in there, in proportion to the time, they're just constantly trying to get through things. And the one thing they didn't rush was something that I actually thought didn't need to be there, and that's the whole thing with showing the air nomads getting defeated. Why did we start with that? The whole mystery and intrigue of Avatar in the first episode is you start with that opening crawl, you get a little bit of context, right? And I sometimes wonder whether that was actually needed, like that water, earth, fire, air, if they actually needed to start with that in the first episode, rather than just starting with Sokka and Katara. But it's sort of like the opening crawl in like Star Wars, right? It's like it's the Star Wars opening crawl. Okay, then you jump right into the action. But in the original show, it's they go through that monologue, and then it's Sokka and Katara, and you get to know them, and it's just a brother and sister, and it starts so simply with them just being in this little valley of like this glacial valley with a river running through it, and they're in a canoe. And then they discover Aang, and the whole mystery is, who is this kid? What are these flashbacks he's having? It's really weird. Could he be the Avatar? But they kind of just start out with telling you Aang's the Avatar. And well, yes, most people watching Avatar will know that Aang's the Avatar. It's more of a mystery also that you're experiencing through those two characters, right? So you're cutting all of that away, all of that mystery and intrigue of who Aang is. You've already showed his backstory. And by the time we learn Aang's backstory in the animated show, in the episode The Storm, it's a lot more impactful because it informs a lot of why Aang is the way he is. A lot of him being in denial, and that he's lost his people, why he reacts to some things so strongly. You get more context from that, and it hits you so emotionally hard. And same thing with Zuko in that episode. In the episode The Storm, you learn about the Agni Kai between him and Fire Lord Ozai. And while you certainly don't see that in this episode, Uncle Iroh just says that line, and like in the first 30 minutes of us knowing Zuko, he just says, "Oh, your father sent you out to get the Avatar, and this is your destiny." Why are we doing that? Why do that? It just, I know that you have a lot to get through, but I really think there should have been another way to sprinkle that through, or maybe they could have just cut out the thing in the beginning with the air nomads. I honestly was just kind of baffled watching this. I hate to say this, but I was just looking at this thinking, how could this turn out so poor? How is that possible that they could do that? I don't understand. We get the thing with Aang coming into the village. We get the thing with the Fire Nation showing up. This is sort of starting to run together in my mind, honestly, because I've seen the original show so many times. I saw the 2010 film, which was not great, by the way. I'm not saying the 2010 film was better than what this was. The film and this, I think, have different things that they do better, kind of trading off. But anyway, so when Zuko shows up there, and Aang bends the air, and Zuko says, or they tell Zuko that he tells Zuko that he's the Avatar. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. He tells Zuko that he's the Avatar. Zuko kind of acts surprised by this, which is weird because he bends the air, and you would think he knows that. But what I was really trying to say there was, this is all happening. This scene with Zuko confronting the village is sort of happening as just a matter of progression. We don't really get a moment where Aang learns that his people are gone and he grieves for it. It's just, they tell him that the air nomads are gone and that they've been exterminated, and he just kind of doesn't react. Like, I don't understand how they could have possibly done that. They're reciting this thing to him. I mean, to Aang, he left the other day. He just left yesterday. And they're telling him, your people are gone. The Fire Nation took them out. And Aang's only reaction is to say, wait a minute, I've got friends in the Fire Nation, which, again, is something they said in the original show, but it loses all of its context and its meaning here, because he's just kind of reacting to it. And in the 2010 film, we actually do this a bit better, because, and we do it in the original animated series better, because that whole time, Aang is in denial. Aang is saying, oh, there's no way the Fire Nation could have gotten to the air nomads because we have flying bison, and no one can get to the air temples if they don't have a flying bison, right? And in the 2010 movie, it's just kind of skipped over. They find him, and then they kind of go to the... Anyway, I don't remember in what order that happens, but I think there's some way they kind of got around that there. But then in the 2010 film, when he goes to the air temple, he kind of freaks out. So even though they kind of delayed it, there was a freak out moment from Aang where he goes, no! It's kind of the most intense moment in the film, and I think it's honestly one of the best moments in that film, where you get a little glimmer of what that film could have been. But here it just feels all wrong, because by the time they go to the temple, you get that emotional moment with Gyatso at the end. So I said the episode redeemed itself a little bit at the end, because that flashback with Gyatso was a little bit emotional. But again, I really don't know if it's because of what they built in that episode. It's the Avatar state. It feels awkward when Aang goes into the Avatar state. It doesn't feel very organic. It doesn't feel like, oh, obviously he's triggered his Avatar spirit because there's a music swell, and like you're kind of getting what they're trying to do. And keep in mind, I'm a person who's seen the series a lot of times, so I know what they're trying to do. I can't imagine for people who haven't how much that would have felt kind of weird there. The show does feel kind of awkward. That's another thing I'll say. It's awkward. It's weird. Some of the delivery is weird. Some of the looks that the characters are giving each other is weird. Like the pacing of the fighting is kind of strange. I just don't really know why they're doing it this way. Okay, I meandered a little bit when I was talking about that. I have to talk a little bit about some of the other things I didn't like. So the violence and the language. Uh, why? I mean, if you were going to do that kind of series, I could respect that. If they were, I mentioned in the previous video that I would have respected it if they were doing more of a dark, less kiddish, more classic martial arts type thing, and it's got a little bit more violence, it's a bit more adult, but the rest of the series doesn't feel like that, and it feels much more like a PG film where they have to put something in there that's more adult, and it comes completely out of left field. Like, in the beginning, when they're firebending, you've got one person who knocks a fire blast at the earthbender, and, like, it knocks the earthbender over, right? So we've got that thing that kind of saved us from some violence in the series where it's like, okay, fire doesn't necessarily instantly burn you to a crisp, it just knocks you over. But then we get the Mortal Kombat fatality with Fire Lord Sozin grabbing the guy's wrist and then basically burning him to a crisp. Why? Why was that there? That felt so out of place. And then you've got some of Zuko's faculty and staff of Zuko's ship, right? You've got some of Zuko's sailors basically using some language amongst themselves, and it feels so weird putting that there. On a positive note, the music in the series is quite good. I remember listening to that in that beginning montage or that beginning shot, and having the drums there and the orchestral music, and it's like boom 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 boom. If you don't pay attention to music production a lot, you might not know this, but a lot of modern music is very highly dynamically compressed, meaning when you're supposed to be having thunderous drums, they level everything off so it sounds even, and so you've got, here comes the big heavy drums, and they're going boom, 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 like in the background, right? And whereas in older shows, when there was a drum beat that was going to come in, they would let that volume crash above the rest of the track, boom, 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 and this sounds a lot more like that. And even the Avatar theme at the end, it sounds very close to the original. It's not wholly different. It's nice. It sounds a little bit faster and a little bit more intense. So I do like the music. I just wanted to throw that in. Of the actors, I'm trying to think who the best actor is. I was gonna say Katara. I really don't know. Every time I thought an actor in this episode was going to have, like, a really good moment, like, I thought the actor was going to, I was like, oh, I like the way that this is painting. There's a few lines in there that were just kind of awkward. Like, Katara had some good lines in the beginning, like when she was telling Sokka, it's like, oh, it must be because of your great leadership skills. And he's like, yeah, I know. And then she's, like, laughing at him, like, okay, that's a good line delivery. I like that version of Katara and how it's looking so far. But then later, she has those lines where she's kind of just, like, kind of deadpan delivering things, and it feels dry. So characters go between having really good line deliveries. I mean, all of the characters did that. They had some good line deliveries, and then the other line would just feel so, like, detached, I think the most underwhelming performance in the episode is probably Sozin, I'm going to say, simply because for what Sozin was and him being kind of the one who started the war against the air nomads, I understand being stoic, but Sozin had kind of, in the original show, he had more of a quiet, sort of scowling, angry, stoic personality. When in this one, he just kind of seems like he's coming in to ask if, like, the mail's here yet. And I know that sounds like me being kind of snarky. I'm really not trying to be, but I'm just saying that's the way that line felt. That's the way those lines felt. It just felt like he was disengaged. And the whole thing, the thing that, I know I've already mentioned it, but the thing that really was just getting to me was just how rushed it was. How they're just spewing exposition at the audience so quickly and trying so hard not to have to go into too much detail. I mean, I'm sure not that they weren't trying hard not to do that, but it feels like we have to lay all this groundwork. And I'm just thinking, yeah, this is, at the end of the day, it feels about the same as the 2010 film. And for as much as, and I'm sorry if I already said this, but for as much as they were trying to rush through things, I just think Avatar, the original series, it was so much more efficient. Avatar was able to put so much character development and so much emotion and so much variety of how you're feeling ups and downs into such a short runtime. Remember, in that first episode, we get that opening text about the four nations. We get Sokka and Katara discovering Aang. We get them going back to the Water Tribe. We get Sokka's whole thing with the little kids and him being sort of in charge of them. We get to see some funny moments with, like, Appa. We get, like, the flying snot monster thing. We get this is Katara, my flying sister. And we see Zuko. We see him training with Uncle Iroh. We get Uncle Iroh's personality. We get that moment where Zuko says, "I don't need any calming tea." We get the sky beam. We get the seal sort of calling up. We get Aang's flashback. We get them going down to the Fire Nation ship. You know, we get the penguin sledding moment and all those visuals. And in that ship, we get Aang learning that he's, been away for 100 years, and we see his shock from that. And then, we get that sort of blooming romance between Katara and Aang, where Aang says, well, I wouldn't have gotten to meet you. And then Aang reaches a little bit of a resolve, and we see a little bit of his resilience, and he goes out through the ship, sets off the booby trap, and Zuko says, "I found the Avatar as well as his hiding place." And that is all in 22 minutes. Okay? Like, they established that entire world, all those characters, all those moments in 22 minutes. And then by the end of the second 22 minutes, we get everything else. We get, for example, the battle between Sokka and Zuko showing his bravery. We get Aang escaping. We get the thing at the end where Aang says, I never wanted to be. And then you get the thing at the end where, like, we have to go to all these places. Like, that was 44 minutes of television that they established all that stuff. And I think this episode was about 45 minutes, right? And it just felt like, I don't know. I mean, we technically got through more things because we said more things, but it's just, nothing about those first two episodes of Avatar felt like it was rushing at all. And you got almost the same amount of content out of that in terms of just how much we covered and definitely emotional depth. So I would just tell people, at the end of the day, just watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, the animated series. It's considered one of the best, not animated shows, one of the best shows ever made. This just feels so different, and different's fine, but it's so different in terms of not telling those characters' stories in the way that they deserve. I would just tell people, just don't watch it. You don't need to watch it. Now, in terms of whether I'm going to watch the rest of the series, I'm inclined to say no. I would have said a definite no if it wouldn't have been for the end, because, the way that Monk Gyatso scene was done, as much as I said the lead up to it and the execution didn't completely make sense, the actual moment where you see Aang reflecting and the flashback to Gyatso, that was pretty well done. So, that's the kind of moment there where it's like, okay, let's see the story told in a way that you can't really tell it in a cartoon necessarily. That's what I wanted to watch this for, right? I didn't expect it to be a replacement, but just let's see the story told in a slightly different way. Having watched it, and seen that one scene, am I gonna watch the rest of it? I mean, unless I get people telling me, no, it gets way better, you have to keep watching. Unless I hear someone telling me that, I really don't think I'm gonna finish this. I might even just go ahead and cancel my Netflix today, because I got Netflix yesterday just so I could watch this. Right? I haven't had a Netflix membership in a long time. I really only renew things typically on streaming services when I want to watch something new, and I renewed it. And I kind of wish I would have gotten the ad Netflix and hadn't paid $16 to get this, but yeah, I'm probably gonna cancel the Netflix and just use the rest of the month to watch other things that I've been wanting to watch. I don't know. I'm undecided at this point whether I'm going to keep watching it. It would be nice to see it through, but it was boring me. That's the thing I said I was afraid of too. I was just bored, guys. I was just sitting there kind of with my face smashed against my palm, like, oh man. And if I honestly, I'm going to tell you this is true. If I would not have been recording a review for it, if I would not have told people I was going to review it, I probably would not even finish the first episode. I probably would have turned it off about a third of the way through. So I'm conflicted. I don't think I'm going to finish it. I'm definitely not going to recommend it to anybody. But I don't think. I guess I'll wait till the end of the day. I'm still kind of tossing it back and forth in my head. I'm gonna wait and see, but I'm probably not gonna finish it. I mean, there have been many shows that I just turned off because they didn't grip my attention in the first episode, and I know that's a little harsh because sometimes you have to watch a few episodes. And there's the series She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, which is an animated series. Didn't get my attention in the first episode, and I turned it off. And then I had a friend tell me how good it was, and I went back and watched it, and I really liked it. So, that's kind of a thing I've done before, but I think the difference here is I already know the story. This is not a world I need to understand. This is a world I already know, and I'm watching someone adapt it in a way that I don't like. As a side note, I can't help but wonder if this is the reason why Mike and Brian left the show. They were co-creators on the show, or they were co-creators of the original show, rather, the animated show, and then they made this Netflix animated show, or the Netflix live-action show, and Mike and Brian left because of creative differences with the show creators. And they said, real quick before I go back to that, they said it still has the potential to be good, but it won't be what they wanted for the show. And this show was seen largely as a way for them to make the live action adaptation they always wanted to make. And now, having watched this, I'm wondering, is this the difference? Is this why they left? And I gotta be honest with you guys, it's kind of hard for me not to get frustrated by this. Because so many times these guys... Am I getting emotional about this? So many times these guys have put in the work to build this world. And whether it be Nickelodeon or anybody else or any other network, they keep giving them the cold shoulder and not letting them do what they want to do. And it's like, how much better might this show have been if you would have allowed them to get involved? It's kind of difficult not to get a little irritated about it. It's kind of difficult not to feel that frustration about that, because it's like, if you had a creative vision for the show and the original show creators were coming in and saying, no, you have to do this exactly the way we want it, and we want it to be just like the original, and you're saying, no, I ultimately have final say of this and I want to do it this way, I can respect that. As a person who is a big fan of adaptations and change over time, I can respect that. But it seems to me that these guys probably had a vision in mind that would have improved a lot of these things, if I had to guess. I'm guessing that's probably what was going down, is that they probably didn't, and I'm speculating here, right? Please don't take this as anything verified. I do not know this. I am completely guessing, okay? I have not ever even spoken to Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, obviously. I don't know those guys. I don't know what's in their mind. I've only ever seen their shows and interviews, right? So I'm completely guessing. But my guess is showing the Fire Nation attacking the air nomads, things like that, that's probably what they did not want in the show. Because it completely undermines the way that Aang's story is told originally. And maybe they had a problem with the violence and stuff like that. I'm not sure if they did. It might have been that. But anyway, yeah, I'm a little bit frustrated by the fact that they are gone and didn't get to be involved in this show. Because this show, this show was announced 6 years ago. We learned about this 6 years ago, and it's like, after all this time, after all this build-up, this is what we got, and it just isn't good, guys. So, I'm not sure whether I'm going to finish this. After this, though, I think I'm done with remakes. Anything that I like that's like, oh, we're making a live action for... I'm probably just going to skip it, honestly, because I just don't think it's working. I don't think it's... we're not winning with remakes, as some might say. So, anyway, guys, I've got to go for now. Please let me know what you think in the comments about this show. But in the meantime, I will talk to you later. I'm probably going to watch some Avatar: The Last Airbender today, honestly. I'll talk to you guys later, and have a great day. Bye-bye. Hey guys, just an added bonus note here. There's a few things I forgot to say in my initial recording of this, so I'm going to add those right now. Just a few things that I didn't like, and one thing that's actually positive that I forgot to note here. Again, not trying to be disrespectful to anyone, really. I just am trying to offer some honest feedback here. So the first thing is the episode somehow looked less cinematic than the TV series, I think, than the animated series, I should say. This live-action series has a lot less of a cinematic look than the cartoon does, which is weird, because it's drawn animation in 2005, and this is 2024, and has the budget of a Netflix show. But yeah, the cartoon looks a lot more cinematic, and I realize you can draw things and make it a lot more presentable, but the whole point of making things in live action, I thought, was to make it more visually stunning and do things you couldn't do with the cartoon. But the cartoon just... I mean, think about the way it looks when they find Aang in the iceberg in the cartoon versus the live action series. I think the cartoon has a lot more atmosphere and a lot more of a... It has a lot more of an intense emotional slash tonal feel to it than the live action one does, even though the live action one looks more HD and more sparkly. If you think about the way the Fire Nation is always seen in the temples and stuff, you get more close-up shots in the newer one, but in the old one it's a lot more far-away shots. I mean, think about how Sozin was framed in those flames in the original series. So that's something worth pointing out. The second thing is, the lines... I said it sounded like people were reading off of a piece of paper with the lines a lot of the time, but the lines actually had another thing going that I was kind of baffled by, which was they sounded kind of sloppy a lot of the times. Not in terms of these actors are sloppy, but just the way that they use takes that I think should have gotten additional takes. You know, there are times where characters will mumble things or kind of join words together. And when you talk to people every day, you speak like this. When you're talking to someone else, you talk and you sort of mumble things and jumble things together. But for a TV series, I think the words should be a lot more clear. And I just noticed that. I noticed that a lot of the time they were running words together, and I thought, that's probably not the take they should have used. The third thing I didn't like, and the final thing I didn't like, was it's the year 2024. I really think we should do away with the strobing lights in thunderstorms. Now, this is something that is a little annoying to me personally, but I know a lot of people don't really mind it so much because there's not really a ton of people with epilepsy, but I think there's enough people with epilepsy where we have to question why we're doing this, because a lot of the time when there's flashing lights in shows, people don't notice. I sometimes ask people, because I've actually studied this a little bit in TV shows, like if they notice flashing, a lot of times they don't. And thunderstorms don't look like that. A lot of times there's some rumbling in the clouds and a little bit of strobing up in the clouds, but then, the thunderbolt comes down, or the lightning bolt comes down, and then there's one bright flash, and then it's done. But most of the time in a thunderstorm, hopefully those lightning bolts aren't landing right next to you, so they're kind of flashes of white strings that are happening far away and a little bit of rumbling in the clouds. It doesn't look like you're at a rave when you're in a thunderstorm, and I don't know why they keep doing that. It's 2024. I think we need to dispense with this. I think it honestly doesn't really add anything. People could say, oh, it looks more dramatic, but I honestly think it doesn't really add anything. I think people just tune it out. So I think that's something we need to stop doing. The thing that I really liked that I forgot to mention was there was one gag that made me laugh out loud, and I think it was probably the only one that made me laugh out loud. But it's the jump cut when Sokka gets on Appa, because in the show it's you love taking me out of my comfort zone, don't you? And then they're sitting on Appa, and he's like, "What did that word say again? Wahoo?" Or what did that word? What did that kid say again? Wahoo, yip yip. And then they fly up. We're expecting that, but then you get the jump cut where Sokka's like, "There's no way I'm getting on that." Ah, and that was a funny joke, right? That was cute. I'll give the show that one. That was a nice thing. But anyway, guys, I hate to end a negative review like with kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to go into the negatives again. But anyway, you know my thoughts. I concluded it already. I just wanted to throw that extra stuff in there, guys. I will talk to you later. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.